Hello and welcome back to the Curious Kid podcast. Happy Super Bowl Sunday. The Super Bowl is a huge deal, especially here in the United States. Last year, 123,714,000 people tuned in to see the Chiefs defeat the 49ers in Super Bowl 58. There are only 14 TV programs in U.S. history that have had 100 million viewers or more, and 13 of those were Super Bowls. Football is so popular here in the United States that it's amazing if you think about it that it's taken nearly 300 episodes for us to finally get curious about football. But what better day to do it than Super Bowl Sunday?
Triple mailbag!
Triple mailbag! Hello, my name is Bo. I am 7 years old from Dallas, Texas. I love listening to your podcast. My favorite episode so far was about soccer that I listened to on my way to camp. I am curious about football, the American kind. I would love to learn more about it on your podcast. Thank you, Bo. Dear Jacob and Olivia, my name is Ben and I live in Sunnyvale, California. I'm curious about ancient Egypt. I'm also curious about salt, and I want to know how it's made. I'm curious about football, and I want to know when football was invented. I love your podcast. My mom's favorite episode was curious about fruit and chess. My favorite episode is curious about mountains. From Ben of Sunnyvale, California. Hi, Jacob and Olivia. We love your podcast. I'm curious about football, specifically American football. I want to know how it was invented, why it's called football, why it's only played in America, mostly. Thanks, and hope to learn more from you. Owen, age 7 from Rochester, New York.
Those were some great messages in our mailbag from listeners in Texas, California, and New York. Those 3 states actually have something in common. All 3 of them have multiple NFL teams. Also, none of the teams from Texas, California, or New York are playing in tonight's football game. Maybe next year. As a Jets fan, the wait for another Super Bowl championship seems never ending. We are stoked to learn all about football this week for Bo, Ben, Owen, and also Caroline from Ashburn, Virginia, who filled out one of our episode topic suggestion forms to let us know that she wants to get curious about football too.
Let's learn all about the action-packed, touchdown-scoring, bone-crunching world of football. In the United States, football is a way of life for millions of people. Between the high school games on Friday nights, college football on Saturdays, and NFL football on Sundays, it's a sport full of skill, strategy, and heart.
And when it comes to Super Bowl parties, it's also full of snacks. Grab your helmets and cleats, and let's huddle up and learn about football. The question of the week is, how much will it cost a company to put a 30-second commercial in this year's Super Bowl?
Lots of money. We are going to have some help on our learning adventure this week. Noah will of course join us to share 5 unbelievable facts about football. But we are also lucky to have former NFL wide receiver Anthony Armstrong join us to answer some questions to let us know what it's like playing in the NFL.
I can't wait to ask Anthony Armstrong a few questions. Let's kick things off by learning what American football is and how it's different than other sports like soccer and rugby.
American football is a team sport where 2 teams compete to score points by moving an oval-shaped ball into the opposing team's end zone. Players can do this by running with the ball or by throwing the ball to teammates.
It's a bit like rugby, but with way more pads and helmets. American football actually evolved from rugby and soccer in the late 1800s. The biggest difference between football and rugby is that in football, you can pass the ball forward, which isn't allowed in rugby.
Soccer is all about kicking the ball, but American football has very little kicking. American football is mostly about carrying and throwing the ball. In its early years, many people called American football gridiron football to distinguish itself from soccer. The word gridiron describes the grid-like lines on the football field.
The game of football is played on a field that is 100 yards long and 53 yards wide. Each team has 11 players on the field at a time. The goal is to move the ball into the other team's end zone to score a touchdown, which is worth 6 points.
A team moves the ball downfield, but they only have 4 tries, which are called downs, to move the ball at least 10 yards. If they succeed, they get a fresh set of downs and can keep going. If they don't, they can attempt a field goal for 3 points, or the other team gets the ball.
So there is a ton of strategy. Run the ball or throw the ball. Go for it on 4th down or attempt a field goal. Or punt the ball away to the other team.
Also, after scoring a touchdown, the team that scored has the option to try to kick an extra point for 1 additional point, or to try to get the ball back into the end zone on a single play for 2 additional points.
There are lots of player positions in football. For example, there are quarterbacks, linemen, and wide receivers.
On offense, the quarterback is the leader of the team. The quarterback decides whether to throw the ball, hand it off to a teammate, or run the ball.
Then there are running backs, who carry the ball, and wide receivers, who catch passes. The offensive line protects the quarterback and opens up paths for the runners.
On defense, the defensive linemen try to tackle the quarterback or stop runners. Linebackers do a bit of everything on defense, like tackling, defending passes, or blitzing the quarterback. Defensive backs guard the wide receivers and try to prevent them from catching the ball.
Football got its start way back in the late 1800s at colleges like Harvard and Yale. Back then, the game was a lot more like rugby. Over time, new rules were added, like the forward pass, to make the game more exciting and also safer.
A guy named Walter Camp is known as the father of American football, and he created a lot of the rules we still use in football today. He came up with the ideas like the line of scrimmage, which is the line where each play starts, and also the 4-down system for advancing the ball.
It is really important that I mention something since my dad attended Rutgers University here in New Jersey. The first ever football game took place at Rutgers University, and it was between the Princeton Tigers and the Rutgers Queensmen. The Princeton team name is still the Tigers, but Rutgers has since changed their name to the Scarlet Knights. That game, which took place on November 6th, 1869, was won by Rutgers, and the final score was 6-4. About 100 people gathered to watch that game, now considered to be the first ever competitive game of gridiron football.
That was great, Olivia. Thanks for mentioning that. By the way, there is no way I was going to let this whole episode go by without mentioning the fact that Rutgers University is the birthplace of football.
It sure is. That was over 150 years ago, and things have changed a ton since then. The NFL, or National Football League, started in 1920. It's the most popular professional football league in the world.
The first ever Super Bowl, which took place in 1967, was won by the Green Bay Packers. There is so much to love about the Super Bowl, and different people might look forward to different things. The game is exciting, but there is also the halftime show, the commercials, and lots of people eat yummy food during the Super Bowl, like wings, pizza, and chips.
There's one thing that will forever change the way you sleep, and it's the softest 100% organic cotton sheets from Boll & Branch. You'll fall asleep faster, wrapped in the most luxurious comfort. You'll never sleep hot again with sheets that feel breathable to sleep in. You'll experience the purest softness on night 1 and feel your sheets get even softer with every wash. Discover the difference with 15% off your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com with code CUMULUS. Exclusions apply. See site for details.
All right, Noah loves football, and he is all pumped up to share 5 unbelievable facts that you need to know about football. Take it away, Noah! Fact number 1. 12 out of the 32 teams in the NFL have never won a Super Bowl. That's over a third of the league. 4 teams in the NFL have never even been in a Super Bowl, and those 4 teams are the Cleveland Browns, the Detroit Lions, the Houston Texans, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. I guess being a Jets fan isn't that bad after all. Fact number 2. NFL players were not required to wear helmets until 1943. That means that most NFL players played the game without wearing helmets for over 20 years. That sounds dangerous. Fact number 3. The oldest team that still has its original name is the Green Bay Packers. They haven't moved or changed their team name since the team was established back in the year 1919. Fact number 4. For those of you who might be a little too young to remember Tom Brady playing in the NFL, he is considered by many to be the GOAT, which stands for greatest of all time. That's because he has appeared in more Super Bowls, 10, and won more Super Bowls, 7, than any other player in NFL history. He was also the oldest player to ever play in and win a Super Bowl. Lots of respect to Patrick Mahomes, but Tom Brady is the GOAT, no doubt. Fact number 5. The Buffalo Bills and Minnesota Vikings have Super Bowl history, but that history is mostly bad. Both teams lost the Super Bowl 4 times in a decade. As far as the Bills go, they actually somehow made it to and lost 4 Super Bowls in a row.
Those facts were crazy, Noah. Thank you for sharing them with us. We're not done just yet. Before we answer the question of the week, we are so lucky to have a former NFL player join us to answer a few questions. Anthony Armstrong grew up in Indiana, and he was a standout high school player in football and in track and field. He played college football at West Texas A&M, and he received first-team All-LSE honors in 2003 as he caught 54 passes that season for 740 yards and 4 touchdowns. In the NFL, Anthony Armstrong played for the Washington Commanders, then known as the Washington Redskins. In a superb 2010 season, Armstrong recorded 44 receptions for 871 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had a career-long 76-yard reception against the Eagles on November 15th that year. During that season, he had 7 receptions of 40 yards or more. And he's here to give us a glimpse of what it's like to play football. Take it away, Olivia.
Anthony Armstrong, thank you so much for joining us on Curious Kid Podcast. I love watching NFL football, and I'm really excited to ask you a few questions to learn more about what it's like to be on the inside of the game I love. Football teams play once a week, but I've heard that the amount of preparation for each football game is insane. Between watching videos, talking strategy, and all the physical training and practice, there's a lot to do to prepare for a game. Can you share with us what an average week is like for an NFL player?
It's a great question. The NFL week is, there's a lot that's packed into those few days that you get to practice, because when you start out the week, you're generally going to have, a theme for the day. Some of your base plays are going to happen on Wednesdays. And I really should go back, but everything starts on Wednesdays, generally on Wednesdays. You have your base offense, base defense. Then when you move into Thursdays, you change your focus to more third down and special situations. And then Friday, you make your way into, once again, different situations. And in those periods, it's more like red zone, short yardage, things of that nature. So now, that's kind of how the week goes into flow. Saturday, you're going to have a walkthrough and travel. And then Sunday, you play. Mondays, you could play, or you're going to come back in, watch tape, and, take care of your body. Tuesday had been the general day off, but, some teams have played around with that. So going through that week, that's what it's like practicing. Inside of there, you're still going to have some weightlifting. Some people do it before practice. Some people do it after practice. You're going to have to mix in visits to the chiropractor, visits to, the training staff to take care of any soreness that you may have, any injuries you may be nursing, massage therapists, any type of appearances that you may have out in the community that are still going on. Plus, you still have your normal day-to-day life, your normal at-home duties. If you got a family, you got family duties. If you're at home with no family duties, you're probably studying some film and probably playing some video games to relax. But each week is pretty crazy. There's a lot that goes on, but there's some solace in having that routine.
Something I've noticed about wide receivers in the NFL, these days is that just about all of them wear gloves. Decades ago, it wasn't as common to see wide receivers wearing gloves. Some great receivers like Tim Brown and Lynn Swann didn't wear gloves. You wore gloves when you were playing on the field. Why have gloves become so popular? And are receivers using them for something else besides protecting their hands from the footballs that are being thrown at their delicate hands by quarterbacks that are zinging footballs around like missiles?
I can tell you this. The gloves are definitely for some style, but there's a little tackiness that's to it. A lot of them have some tackiness or sticky nature that help people have a lot of these one-handed catches that you see. Whenever you have that, bit of advantage that you can put in your back pocket or, literally have on your hands, and it's open for everybody. It's open for everybody. Sometimes you see quarterbacks using gloves because of the tacky nature for helping them grip the football. So wearing gloves is definitely a part to be able to grip that ball a little bit better when it comes your way. But then you also got to have some swag about it. You got to have some style and make sure they match and they look good. So, and plus you see when people will do celebrations and sellies, they'll put their hands up and it'll like have a picture when those two gloves are put together. So that's out there as well.
Your first NFL touchdown came on October 10th, 2010, when you caught a 48-yard catch from Donovan McNabb in the fourth quarter to give your Redskins a 13-10 lead against the Packers. It was an absolutely beautiful jumping catch in the end zone. You were so charged up that you danced the Dougie to celebrate. There are other things that happen during an NFL game that must feel great, like sacking a quarterback or getting a turnover, but nothing can be better than scoring a big touchdown for your team. What is scoring a touchdown like? And did you plan to hit the Dougie after scoring your first touchdown, or did that just happen spontaneously?
Oh man, catching that touchdown was absolutely electric. I remember looking up at the ball and the crowd was roaring, and then all of a sudden it went silent and all my focus went on this football. And I went up there and I caught it and I kept my hands on the ball, and the guy tried to knock it out and I kept it away from him. And then when the ref's hands went up for touchdown, I started pumping my fist in the air, and then it immediately hit a couple of the Dougies. And so, no, it was not spontaneous. I knew what I was going to do, but, I mean, it was way more exciting and way more electric than I initially thought it was ever going to be. So I'm thankful for it, man. I'm thankful for Donovan for putting that ball up there and giving me a chance to make a play. But, yeah, man, hitting the Dougie was big, man. I planned on that one.
When I think of different things that make a great wide receiver, speed has to come first. What other skills are important to be a great wide receiver?
Being a receiver is more than just catching passes and scoring touchdowns. That's the fun part. That's the part that everybody sees. That's the highlight reels. But when you are in the NFL and by the time you make it to the league, there's only one of those guys that's going to get the ball pretty much at will. Everybody else has to fit into a particular role, and you have to be able to block. That's something that a lot of people don't include whenever you're thinking about receivers. You have to be willing and able to block. If you can't block, you can't play on this field. They can't trust you to put you out there. So blocking is something that comes into play. Being consistent, consistent in your routes, consistent in where you're supposed to be, consistent in catching the ball. Having good hands, and you can train some of those things. A lot of times speed is just naturally given, but there are a lot of instances where, I've seen guys get faster, but sometimes not even the fastest player ends up being a really good receiver because they're able to get in and out of their breaks. They're really consistent with their hands, and they're reliable to their quarterback. So anybody that's a receiver, you trying to build those skills, think of those extra skills outside of just catching passes and scoring touchdowns, because that is great, but work on your blocking too. Make sure you're consistent. Be a great teammate as well, because there's only one football going around. Eventually, they're going to have to throw it to somebody else from time to time.
Complete the following sentence. The best wide receiver in NFL history is blank.
I'm giving it to Randy Moss. Randy Moss and Marvin Harrison are my two favorites, but I give it to Randy because he was bigger than Marvin. And he was just so dominant during his time period, just right out of the gate. I mean, I think about the 3-touchdown game against the Cowboys on Thanksgiving. I think he's up there with as just one of the greatest athletes, hands, speed. He had all of that right there, which you look for as a receiver. Marvin Harrison is my favorite receiver of all time. Just the size, his size, very similar in stature, his productivity, his ability to just stay so consistent. That's somebody that I envied my game and copied my game after. But Randy Moss or Marvin Harrison, those are my top guys.
Anthony Armstrong, thanks a million for sharing your time with us and giving our listeners a glimpse at what it is like to play in the NFL. We hope you enjoy Super Bowl Sunday.
Speaking of Super Bowl Sunday, anybody that wants to get a commercial in the Super Bowl is going to end up spending a lot of money. How much will it cost for a 30-second commercial during the Super Bowl?
If you want to get a 30-second commercial for the Super Bowl, you are going to end up spending at least $7 million. That's just the fee you would need to pay Fox, the channel that's airing the Super Bowl. That doesn't include the cost of producing the commercial itself, which in many cases will cost millions more. That's a lot of money, so start saving up.
Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's podcast, number 292, on football.
Great job, Olivia, and great job, Bo, Ben, Owen, and Caroline for the hard-hitting episode topic suggestion. We have some awesome people to thank this week.
We want to thank our newest Patreon supporters, Emian and Adelia M. and Noah D.
Thanks so much for your support of the podcast. Join us next week when we will get curious about playing cards for listeners in South Carolina. As always, thank you so much for listening and getting curious with us.